Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. There is a town, forgotten by maps and memories alike, hidden beyond the sprawl of highways and cell towers. Its name was once whispered between truck drivers and night shift clerks who swore they'd seen its cracked road signs appear and vanish like mist. They called it Graybridge, but no record of it remains in government files, no satellite photograph captures its lonely streets. And yet, it waits. On certain nights, when the sky itself seems too vast and silent, as if the stars are holding their breath, Graybridge reappears. Its empty avenues flicker back into reality, waiting for a visitor to cross its threshold. It was on one such night that Daniel Harper, a tired history teacher returning from a late-night academic conference, took a wrong turn somewhere between mile marker 87 and 88. He was not drunk, nor distracted. But when his headlights revealed a fork in the road that wasn't on his GPS, the need for rest outweighed his caution. The road to Graybridge was paved but old, its surface cracked like brittle skin. Tall, skeletal trees lined both sides, their branches clawing at the night like crooked fingers. Static crackled faintly from his radio, voices perhaps, or only interference, uttering phrases too warped to be understood. Daniel drove on. He told himself it was temporary. The hotel couldn't be far. But the darkness stretched on endlessly, and with it, a creeping sensation that he was not simply lost, but being expected. After what felt like hours, he saw it. A single street lamp, flickering weakly, illuminating the cracked welcome sign, "Welcome to Graybridge, Population 0. It was a joke, surely. A vandal's prank. But as Daniel crossed beneath it, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air seemed to grow heavier, pressing against his chest. The town opened up around him like a forgotten photograph, silent storefronts with faded signs, rusted swings creaking in an empty park, houses with curtains drawn tightly as if hiding from the world. There was no wind, yet he swore he heard whispers, faint and scattered, like distant voices carried through ancient stone. He parked by a derelict diner. Its neon sign buzzed weakly, "Ruth's Place, open 24 hours." But the windows were dark. Something compelled him to enter, not curiosity, but a quiet command from beneath the surface of his thoughts, as if the town itself was speaking. The door creaked open without resistance. Inside, the diner was frozen in time. Half-eaten plates of food rested on tables. A jukebox hummed softly in the corner, playing a warbled tune from an era long gone. Dust motes drifted lazily through the beams of his flashlight. On the counter lay a notebook, its pages yellowed and brittle. In careful, looping handwriting, someone had scrawled, "If you are reading this, you've already heard them. Do not answer. Do not look at the clock tower. And whatever happens, don't sleep." Daniel's pulse quickened. He looked through the cracked windows at the empty streets beyond. Somewhere in the distance, he saw it, a tall, rusted clock tower looming over the town square, its hands frozen at 3:33. And then the whispers grew louder. They spoke in no language he knew, yet their meaning was clear. They spoke of the sky beyond the sky, of things that hung between the stars, watching. They spoke of Graybridge as a doorway, a place caught between forgotten realities. Daniel tried to leave. He stumbled out into the street, heart racing, but the town had changed. The roads curled and twisted like the coils of some sleeping creature. The diner behind him was gone, and in its place stood an old man. The stranger wore a tattered overcoat and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured most of his face. His voice was a gravelly whisper that seemed to echo inside Daniel's skull. "You're early," the man said. "Most don't find their way here until the dreaming hour." Daniel forced his voice to steady. "What is this place?" The man tilted his head. "It's where stories go when they are forgotten. Where legends sleep, waiting to be remembered. But the town's waking up tonight. And it's hungry for something new." The air thickened, as if reality itself was bending. Lights flickered in the surrounding buildings. Shadows moved where nothing should cast them. The man continued, gesturing toward the clock tower. "That's where you'll find your answers. If you reach it before the bell tolls, you might leave with your mind intact. But if you're too slow..." He trailed off, his grin unseen beneath the shadows of his hat. And then, he vanished. Daniel took a step toward the square. The street stretched longer with each step, impossible angles folding space around him. Shapes lingered in his peripheral vision, too tall, too thin, with faces like static and eyes like distant stars. He ran. Street signs bore impossible names: Ashes Row, Threnody Lane, Void Heart Circle. Windows revealed glimpses of other worlds, of ships adrift in black oceans, of titanic beings coiled among the galaxies, sleeping and waiting. And then, above it all, the tolling began. A low, guttural bell rang once, shaking the ground. Its resonance wasn't sound alone, it was something deeper, like the pulse of some ancient, waking mind. Daniel stumbled into the square, where the clock tower loomed. Its stone surface was etched with symbols no human hand could carve, each glyph writhing subtly when observed. The clock's face flickered, and for a moment, it reflected his own face, but hollowed, distorted, with eyes like twin voids. He climbed. Stairs spiraled endlessly upward, each step colder than the last. Whispers clung to the walls, repeating his name over and over: Daniel Harper, Daniel Harper, Daniel Harper. At the top, he found the mechanism, a vast, bronze pendulum swaying without sound, keeping time for something far beyond human comprehension. And in front of it stood a mirror. The mirror showed him Graybridge, empty, silent, but alive. In its reflection, the streets pulsed like veins, the buildings breathed in tandem with something unseen beneath the ground. But beside his reflection stood another Daniel. Pale, expressionless, waiting. It smiled. The bell tolled again. Daniel turned to run, but found himself rooted in place. The whispers became a single voice, vast and calm: "You were always part of this, Daniel Harper." All who hear the town's call become its storytellers, its guardians, its prey. The other Daniel stepped from the mirror, merging with him in a wave of cold realization. And in that moment, the clock struck 3:34. The streets fell silent. The stars blinked out, one by one, leaving only the whisper of wind through empty streets. And Daniel Harper awoke. But he wasn't in his car, nor the diner, nor his bed. He was standing at the edge of town, beneath the welcome sign: "Welcome to Graybridge, Population 1." The welcome sign still loomed behind him, swaying gently in a breeze that came from nowhere. Population 1. Daniel stood beneath it, the icy realization sinking in. The roads before him stretched endlessly, looping back into the same cracked streets and deserted avenues. His car was gone. The trees, once still and skeletal, now swayed in rhythm to some unseen pulse. He whispered aloud, his voice barely carrying, "I have to wake up." But Greybridge does not let its visitors wake easily. The night remained eternal, the stars hidden behind thick, swirling clouds. Somewhere far off, the clock tower loomed like a sentinel, watching. Daniel turned away from it, deciding instinctively that the answers, or perhaps an exit, lay elsewhere. He wandered. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, he heard a sound other than the whispers, faint, melodic humming. It drifted from an alleyway lined with brick buildings so ancient they seemed carved from shadow itself. Cautiously, Daniel followed the sound, stepping over puddles that reflected skies he did not recognize. There, seated beneath a rusted fire escape, was a young girl, no older than 10. Her hair hung in tangled knots, and her eyes were large and glassy, reflecting nothing. She stopped humming as he approached and looked up at him. "You're new," she said flatly. Daniel knelt to her level. "What is this place? How do I leave?" The girl tilted her head, as if puzzled by the question. "You don't leave. You become part of it. Like the rest of us." "Who's us?" She gestured around the alley, and suddenly Daniel saw them, figures lurking in the shadows. People of all ages and times, some wearing modern clothes, others clad in garments from decades or even centuries past. They watched him with hollow expressions, their bodies semi-transparent, as though only partially here. One by one, they stepped forward. A man in a 1950s postal uniform spoke first. "I came delivering letters. Took a shortcut. Been here 67 years, I think. Or maybe last Tuesday." A woman in a tattered prom dress added, "I was dared to come here in 1982. Still waiting for my friends to find me." A middle-aged hiker, his gear covered in frost, whispered, "I followed a trail on the edge of the woods. The compass spun. I never made it home." And then the little girl, still seated, spoke softly, "They're all stories now. Legends people tell around campfires. We're the ones behind the stories. Greybridge keeps them, alive." Daniel felt the weight of their words. Urban legends weren't fiction. They were fragments of truth, preserved here, trapped in an endless cycle of fear and forgetting. He took a trembling breath. "Why am I here?" The girl gave him a sad smile. "Because someone told your story, Daniel Harper. They said your name, whispered your fate. Now the town remembers you." A deep hum rolled through the streets again, like distant thunder wrapped in silk. The group fell silent. "It's coming," the postal worker whispered. "What is?" Daniel asked. They all looked upward. And there, above the rooftops, the clouds parted to reveal something vast and writhing in the sky. It wasn't a creature, not in any earthly sense. It was a shape, a consciousness. A lattice of impossible angles and shifting geometries, pulsing with cold awareness. The girl spoke its name, though her lips barely moved. The Archivist. The Archivist watched from the space between worlds, cataloging every fear, every forgotten name, every whispered legend. It was the keeper of Graybridge, and its gaze had now found Daniel. He turned to run, but the alley twisted behind him. The building stretched and warped, funneling him toward the center of town once again. The others did not follow. Their purpose was not escape. The square was alive now. Street lamps blinked in patterns like flickering eyes. Doors opened and shut without sound. The ground beneath his feet pulsed like a beating heart. And then he saw it, another figure. This one was unlike the others. She stood beneath the clock tower, her form clear and solid. She wore a long black coat, her face hidden beneath a veil of static. "You've come far," she said, her voice layered, as though speaking from multiple mouths at once. "Who are you?" Daniel asked, his voice barely steady. "I was the last to find the tower," she replied. "And I failed. Now, I watch over the next." She gestured upward. "The only way out is through the clock tower's bell. But it strikes only once each night, and when it does, you must face what you fear most." Daniel's pulse quickened. "And if I succeed? You'll leave. But only until someone tells your story again. Then Graybridge will call you back." Daniel clenched his fists. "I'll take that chance." The figure smiled beneath her veil. "Then be ready. Midnight approaches." The streets shifted again, reconfiguring into a labyrinth. The buildings folded into impossible shapes, and the stars above flickered like dying candles. He began to run. Graybridge resisted his every step. The shadows clawed at his mind, showing him scenes from his past, his mother's funeral, the sky too bright for such sorrow. The accident he caused in college that no one knew about. The faces of his students, staring at him with hollow eyes. Each memory weighed him down, slowing his steps. But something stronger pushed him forward. Hope. Not for himself, but for the others trapped here. If he could escape, maybe he could tell their stories. Maybe he could free them. He reached the base of the clock tower just as the bell began to stir. A low vibration rippled through the earth. The tower groaned, and the great pendulum above swung once, casting fractured light across the square. The door creaked open. Inside, the stairs awaited him. Spiraling upward, lined with carvings that whispered his name. Daniel climbed. And with each step, the darkness deepened. Shapes formed in the corners of his vision, hands without bodies, faces without features, voices without mouths. They spoke of failure, futility, and fear. But Daniel kept climbing. At the top, he found a great bell, tarnished and cracked, suspended over the void. Beneath it, a platform stretched into nothingness. A figure waited there. It was himself. But older. Weary. Eyes filled with regret. The older Daniel spoke, his voice dry and distant. "You won't make it. I've tried. We've tried. We always fail. Graybridge is forever." Daniel stepped forward, heart pounding. Maybe this time is different. The older version shook his head slowly. "Then ring the bell. Face the archivist. And see what becomes of you." Daniel approached the rope, its fibers frayed from centuries of futile attempts. He took hold. The air thickened. The shadows shrieked. The voices begged him to stop, But he pulled. The bell tolled. Its sound wasn't merely heard, it was felt, deep in the bones of the world. A pulse of impossible frequency radiated outward, rippling through the streets, the people, the sky itself. And then, the archivist descended. It filled the sky, vast and endless, its form too immense to be contained in one reality. Its many eyes, scattered across dimensions, turned upon him. It spoke in a voice that was not a voice. "What is your story, Daniel Harper?" He answered, though his mouth did not move. "I am the one who escaped." Silence. For a moment, the archivist paused, as though considering. Then, without warning, it laughed. A deep, cosmic laughter, echoing across eternity. And with that laugh, Daniel fell. Darkness. And then, light. He awoke on the side of the highway. His car parked neatly on the shoulder. The morning sun crept over the hills, painting the world in soft, forgiving colors. The GPS flickered back to life. No sign of Graybridge. No cracked roads. No twisted trees. He checked his phone. It was the exact time he had left the conference the night before. As if none of it had happened. But in his pocket, he found something he hadn't placed there, a small brass key, etched with the symbol of the clock tower. And as he looked down the highway, the wind carried a distant whisper, "See you next time, Daniel Harper." Sleep for the first few days, Daniel tried to tell himself it was just a dream. An elaborate, terrifying, vivid dream. But dreams don't leave souvenirs. The brass key weighed heavily in his pocket. Its surface was cold even in the warmth of the afternoon sun. The symbol of the clock tower, twisted and wrong, glinted faintly as though lit from within. He returned to his job, grading papers and lecturing about myths and urban legends, but his words felt hollow. When he spoke of ancient fears and forgotten places, his students stared back blankly, yet now and then, one or two would glance at the window as if something outside was listening. Sleep brought no rest. Each night, as his eyelids grew heavy, he found himself back in Graybridge. But not as a visitor. As a resident. The sign at the town's edge had changed. "Welcome to Graybridge, population 1." Then the next night, 2, then 3. And with each increase, new faces appeared in the streets. People who had vanished in the real world, missing hikers, lost children, names from old news articles. All of them hollow-eyed. All of them whispering fragments of their stories like broken records. It was then Daniel realized, Graybridge was growing. During the day, he scoured local archives, digging into records of disappearances, ghost towns, and strange vanishings. The deeper he dug, the more terrifying the pattern became. Every few decades, the town appeared in a new location, always near lonely highways or forgotten paths. Travelers would vanish, leaving only rumors behind. Some described a tolling bell heard at night. Others mentioned static voices on old radios. And always, the same name whispered at the fringes of reports. Graybridge. But there were no maps, no coordinates. Graybridge existed between places, a parasite in the fabric of reality, feeding on those who dared to notice it. And now it had noticed him. On the fourth night, the dreams changed. He wasn't alone in the tower. The woman with the veiled face returned, her static voice colder this time. You rang the bell, but you didn't end the story. You only turned the page. What does it want? Daniel demanded. She tilted her head. The archivist? It wants what it has always wanted. To remember what should be forgotten. To collect the stories no one else dares tell. Why me? Because you listened. Most people close their ears. You answered. The clock began to toll again, each chime shaking the sky. You have two choices, Daniel Harper, the woman said. Stay, and be forgotten like the others. Or bring the story into the waking world, and let Graybridge grow beyond its borders. He backed away from her. I won't spread this. She smiled beneath the veil. You already have. He awoke, heart racing, to find his phone buzzing on his nightstand. A new notification. A missed call. From a number he didn't recognize. 333 to 3333. No voicemail. Only static when he called it back. And then, something worse. That morning, during his lecture, one of his students approached him with a question that chilled him to the bone. Professor Harper, she said softly, her eyes distant. Have you ever heard of a place called Graybridge? The town had crossed over. In the following nights, Daniel's dreams and waking life became indistinguishable. Shadows in his apartment stretched too long. The ticking of his wall clock sometimes reversed. People around him began to change. The barista at his favorite cafe looked at him blankly and said, I took a wrong turn on Highway 87 once. I saw a diner. I never stopped. I think about it sometimes. A stranger on the subway hummed the same tune the little girl had hummed in the alleyway. A street performer on the corner rang a small bell and whispered, 1 toll for the living, 2 for the lost. The lines between worlds were tearing. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Daniel stood at the edge of the city park, watching shadows gather where no light should cast them. He felt the key in his pocket pulse, warm now. The veil between Graybridge and reality was thin, trembling. And then the air split. A thin crack, like glass breaking in slow motion, opened in the air before him. Through it, he saw the streets of Graybridge, empty and waiting, the clock tower's spire reaching toward a dead sky. But this time, something else looked back. A figure, tall and angular, stepped through the crack. It wore a smile stitched from shadow. Its eyes shimmered with starless night. It spoke his name, each syllable tasting like cold iron. Daniel Harper. Welcome home. He ran. Through the streets, into the alleys, down corridors he didn't recognize. The city itself warped around him, becoming the town. Neon signs flickered and turned into rotting wood. Concrete became cracked cobblestones. No matter where he fled, Graybridge followed. And always, the bell tolled. In desperation, he returned to the one place he feared most, the library. It was there, in a dusty, unvisited corner of the city's archives, that he found what he sought. A single book, bound in brittle leather, titled, The Town That Dreamed. No author. No publication date. Its pages detailed the origin of Graybridge, a town that once existed in the late 1800s, struck from existence by a cosmic event no one could explain. The townspeople, unable to move on, became stories, whispers on the wind, faces in nightmares. And at its heart, the archivist, a being that feeds on forgotten places and the souls of those who stumble into them. The book ended with a cryptic warning: if you read these words, the town has already found you. Speak its name, and it grows. Deny it, and it waits. The only escape is to finish the story. Daniel knew then what he had to do. He couldn't stop Graybridge from existing. But maybe, if he could finish the story, give it an ending, it would finally rest. He would have to go back. One last time. That night, with the key in hand, Daniel stood beneath the full moon, at the place where the veil was thinnest, the forgotten intersection at mile 87. He turned the key in empty air. A doorway opened. And Graybridge welcomed him home. The streets were different now, more alive, pulsing, aware of his return. The population sign had changed once more. Welcome to Graybridge, population 8. Faces lined the streets, watching. People he recognized from his waking life, the barista, the subway stranger, his student. All trapped now. All waiting. The clock tower's bell began its slow toll. One last climb. Daniel ascended the tower, the whispers louder than ever. This time, the archivist itself waited at the top, its form too vast to comprehend, folding reality around it like a cocoon. It spoke, 1,000 voices in unison. Tell your story, Daniel Harper. Or be forgotten. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. And he spoke. He told the archivist everything. His fears. His failures. His regrets. His longing for redemption. He told the story of Graybridge, from its forgotten origins to its endless hunger. He spoke until there was nothing left to say. And when he finished, the archivist listened. And for the first time, it was silent. The bell tolled one final time. The ground trembled. The tower crumbled into light. And the streets of Graybridge faded, folding back into the void between dreams. Daniel awoke in his bed. Morning light filtered through the window. The key was gone. The whispers were gone. Graybridge was gone. Or so he thought. Until he turned on the radio, and heard a distant, warbled voice reciting a new urban legend. They say there's a town beyond the highways, where the streets whisper your name. No one remembers how to find it, but if you listen closely at 3:33 a.m., you might just hear the bell. And somewhere, faintly, the wind carried the sound of laughter. Not his. Weeks passed, and Daniel tried to forget. He threw himself into work, disconnected from the internet, avoided small towns and lonely highways. But stories have a life of their own. And in a cafe miles away, beneath flickering fluorescent lights, a young journalist named Maya Torres stumbled across a forum thread titled, Graybridge, the town that dreams you. At first, she laughed. Urban legends were her beat, ghost towns, cryptid sightings, roadside mysteries. She'd chased dozens of them, all ending in abandoned barns or prank YouTube videos. But something about this was different. The posts were too specific. Coordinates that led nowhere. Dates that didn't exist. And names, real names, of people reported missing over the last century. And there, buried halfway down the thread, she found a name she recognized. Daniel Harper, last seen July 11th, on Route 87. But Daniel Harper was still alive. He'd just published a new book titled Escaping Graybridge. The contradiction gnawed at her curiosity. So, against her better judgment, she emailed him. Daniel answered the next day, short and clipped, "Whatever you've read, stop reading. Whatever you've heard, stop listening. Graybridge is not a story you want to tell." But to Maya, this was an invitation. She packed a recorder, a notebook, and headed toward Route 87. The highway was as lonely as described. Endless asphalt stretching beneath empty skies. At mile 87, her phone lost all signal. The radio crackled, filling the silence with faint static. And then, through the fuzz, a single phrase whispered, "Population 1." The town appeared without warning. One moment, empty road. The next, cracked streets, leaning streetlights, and a crooked clock tower piercing the horizon. Maya parked her car and stepped out, recorder running. The wind carried faint laughter, distant and childlike. She walked past the welcome sign. "Welcome to Graybridge, Population 1." And with each step deeper into town, the shadows lengthened. At the heart of Graybridge, she found them. The hollow-eyed residents. Frozen in time, whispering fragments of their stories. A man who vanished delivering newspapers in 1924. A teenager dared to enter the woods in 1987. A trucker who took a shortcut in 2003. And among them, to her horror, stood Daniel Harper. But this Daniel was different. Faded, transparent at the edges, as though his body straddled two worlds. He turned to her slowly, recognition flickering in his eyes. "You shouldn't have come." The sky rumbled. The archivist was stirring again. Maya stepped forward, refusing to flinch. "You escaped. I read your book." He shook his head. "No one escapes. I only delayed the end. The story has to be told, over and over. That's how Graybridge survives." "Then how do we end it?" she asked. Daniel looked toward the clock tower. "You don't end a story like this. You finish telling it, and hope no one else listens." The bell began to toll once more. The streets warped, folding reality into impossible angles. The stars blinked out. And from the void, the archivist descended. It was larger than before. Hungrier. It spoke in a voice that tasted like static. "Who tells the story now?" Daniel turned to Maya, his voice trembling. "You have a choice. Become part of the legend, or finish the tale." She understood then. Graybridge wasn't a place. It was a story. A virus of the mind. A shared hallucination sustained by belief. If she stopped believing in it, if she refused to tell it, the story would starve. But if she fled, someone else would find it. And so, Maya did the only thing she could. She opened her recorder and spoke. "Graybridge is a town that dreams of those who dream of it. It waits on forgotten roads, hungers for forgotten souls. But now, the story ends. The bell tolls no more." The archivist froze, its many eyes blinking out one by one. The ground fell silent. And the tower crumbled into dust. The town faded like smoke in the wind. Maya found herself alone on Route 87, the morning sun rising behind her. Her recorder was empty. No sound had been captured. And the welcome sign was gone. Weeks later, she published an article titled, "Graybridge, a myth no one remembers." It gained no traction. No comments. No conspiracy threads. It was as if no one cared. As if the world had already forgotten. And that was how she knew, for now, Graybridge slept. But sometimes, late at night, Maya hears the faint tolling of a bell on the wind. And she wonders if stories like this ever truly end. Or if they only wait for the next dreamer to find them. Somewhere, in a forgotten corner of a dusty highway, a sign flickers back to life. "Welcome to Graybridge, Population 1." And in the shadows, the archivist smiles. Weeks turned into months. Maya returned to her life, but life never quite returned to her. She stopped writing about the paranormal. Stopped chasing rumors. But nightmares followed her wherever she went. Each night at exactly 3:33 a.m., she woke to silence, so thick it rang in her ears like a bell. And outside her window, the shadows seemed to lean just slightly toward her home. Watching. Waiting. Then, on an autumn morning, a letter arrived. No stamp. No sender. Just her name written in jagged script, Maya Torres. Inside, a single page, "The story's not over." Below that, a crude drawing of the clock tower, leaning as if caught mid-collapse. And beneath it, a new name, Jeremy Lane. She had never heard of Jeremy Lane. But curiosity is a disease that never fully heals. A quick search revealed the name, a college sophomore. Amateur podcaster. Last seen exploring the abandoned roads outside his hometown 3 days ago. Police said he was missing. His friends said he was chasing a story about an urban legend. Maya felt the chills settle into her bones. Graybridge had found its next dreamer. She packed a bag and headed north. Jeremy Lane's dorm room was exactly what she expected. Posters of Lovecraftian horrors. A battered laptop. Notebooks full of scrawled notes. And on his desk, an open audio project titled, Graybridge, Episode 1, The Town That Calls. The recording was raw, filled with static and faint, eerie bells in the background. She hit play. And Jeremy's voice echoed softly, "I've heard the stories. A town that only appears when you're lost enough to find it. A place where the streets know your name. Tonight, I'm going to find it." There was a pause. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps on cobblestones. And the toll of a distant bell. The recording ended abruptly. Maya's stomach turned. She had tried to end the story. But Graybridge doesn't end. It waits. She knew she couldn't stop it from finding him. But maybe, just maybe, she could bring him back. That night, she returned to Route 87. The air smelled of rust and forgotten rain. And as the moon rose, the veil thinned once more. The familiar crack appeared in the air, and the outline of the town stretched before her, as if waiting. The sign flickered, "Welcome to Graybridge, Population 2." She stepped through. The streets were quieter this time. No faces peered from windows. No laughter rode the wind. But the clock tower still stood, silent and imposing. And at its base, crouched beneath a flickering street lamp, was Jeremy Lane. He looked up, wide-eyed, as if awakening from a dream. "Maya," he whispered. "I thought I was alone." "You're never alone here," she said softly. "That's the trap." They moved quickly through the streets, shadows following at their heels. The ground trembled as the bell prepared to toll. And then the archivist appeared, vaster than before, limbs like crumbling spires, eyes filled with hollow stars. It spoke in a voice that tasted like endings. "2 stories now. Which shall I keep?" Maya stood firm. "We're taking our stories back." She held out the recorder. And Jeremy, hands shaking, began to tell his story. He spoke of finding the town, of hearing the bells, of seeing faces in the fog. Then Maya added her voice, weaving her tale into his. And for a moment, just a moment, the archivist hesitated. The town trembled, unsure whether it was being fed or starved. Maya spoke the words she'd learned from the dusty tome all those months ago: "A story without a listener cannot live. A town without a name cannot be found. Greybridge, fade from memory." The wind rose to a scream. The clock tower cracked, splintering into shards of forgotten time. And then, silence. Greybridge faded. For real this time. Or so they hoped. They awoke on the side of Route 87, cold and shaken but alive. The sky was pink with dawn. The road was empty. No sign. No town. Jeremy turned to her, voice barely a whisper. "Did we end it?" She smiled sadly. "For now." They returned to their lives. Jeremy deleted his podcast recordings. Maya burned her notes. But the world is full of lonely roads and forgotten places. And in the static between radio stations, sometimes, if you listen closely, you can still hear a bell toll, once, then twice. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of maps, a sign waits in the fog. It flickers to life. "Welcome to Greybridge, population 0. For now. But not forever."